Welcome to another episode of the Kubik Report. We're glad that you could make it here today. Today my guest is Bruce Porteous, who lives in New Zealand. He's a person that I've known, we've written over time. I have met him in New Zealand, I've met him in the Philippines. He's a person of my faith, and he's one who's followed the podcast, the Kubik Report, and we just really appreciate him being willing to answer some questions, because he posted some things on Facebook today after the election of Donald Trump that were very interesting. They caught my attention, and I just thought I'd take a chance and contact him on email and see if he'd be willing to talk about the things that he said. So, first of all, welcome, Bruce, to the podcast.
Greetings, and happy to meet you online, Victor.
Okay, well, it's just very good to see you and talk to you. I have posted a few reels. A reel is a 1-minute video on just before the election of Donald Trump, and I did one afterwards. And they have been quite well taken because a lot of people have responded. But the response that I really valued most was what Bruce talked about in his posting today. And it was about how the next Trump administration will change the world. And the points that he listed were very, very cogently stated. And I found very interesting that these are not views from the United States, but views from overseas. And I would like to have Bruce explain further some of the things that he said. He talks about how the new Trump administration will affect many nations as it implements the policies that they have declared. It will lead to perhaps a great degradation and even the collapse of America as a leader of the free world. That is a frightening thing to all of us, and the creation of another new global order. And so what I found interesting was some of the scenarios that he brought out. So Bruce, maybe to make it easy here, let's just start talking about what relationships the United States will start fostering now that Trump is back in power.
Well, I've been following the Ukraine war daily since it began, which is nearly almost 3 years now. And it has unfolded quite differently than many had predicted originally. The defense of Ukraine has been remarkable, and they've been fighting for their lives. But they have not had the support from the entire Western world. Even from the Europeans have been divided on their support. America has been generous with its aid to Ukraine, but has had this policy of containment rather than defeating the enemy, but containing the enemy. It's a policy that America's had since the Korean War, and it's never been successful in its outcomes. And so today, though Ukraine is very dependent on America's aid, they're terrified that if America cuts off that aid, they will not be able to withstand the onslaught from Russia. And Europe is so divided, and unless they can unify into a collective defence strategy, cannot be relied at present to fill the vacuum if America withdraws. But there's a lot, since the election of Trump, European leaders have been meeting together to work out some sort of collective strategy. And it remains to be seen how this will evolve, but certainly the Eastern European countries, the Baltic countries, Poland, Czechoslovakia, are concerned that Europe would not be able to coordinate their defence to withstand Russia.
Sort of a oversimplified, or I would say that when Trump takes office, that he will basically throw Ukraine under the bus and it will have to fend for itself. Ukraine has been sustained by the current administration to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars, a lot of money, and the new administration coming in saying, why do we have to pay out all this money for this war that's going nowhere? And I do know that with communism, that the West has had containment always. I mean, even with the Vietnam War, no, it was just basically contain these guys, just keep them in their box. It's never worked because they never are satisfied with being there. The same thing with this particular war. The only thing that's understood is power and might. So I'm just don't think that all of a sudden aid will stop to Ukraine. And should there be some signals that it will, I do believe there'll be some dramatic and frightening shifts within Europe itself. You know, we work helping people in Ukraine through Germany. It's only a day's drive. It's frightfully close. And for Poland, where some of the times they travel through, it's very, very close. And these people really feel it. With us in America, we're divided by oceans and far away and have our minds on football and everything else, other diversions. For these people, it is a very, very stark reality. You might want to comment a little bit about what's happening in Germany today, because I found that statement to be very interesting.
Well, yesterday, the German government collapsed. And the reason why it did collapse was because the Minister of Finance resigned over their budget. And was proposing that we needed to spend more on the military and to defend Ukraine, but we have to cut back other areas like welfare and some other social programs by the government. And this led to a disagreement with the coalition partners in the German government. And so now it's going to be a vote of no confidence on the current government, which they expected to lose, and there'll be elections. So they're forecasting elections in March, but the elections are likely to be fought over what support Germany should be giving to Ukraine. But on the political side, Germany's going through quite a lot of changes. There's been a lot more support, particularly in East Germany, for the far left parties who have been pro-Russian. But the Western Germany and Southern Germany got the growth of the more far right parties, and the Christian Democrat Party is gaining a lot more support too. So the outcome of the elections is quite unknown, and more likely to be another coalition. But Germany is really it needs a total shake-up of its government. It's become very bogged down with red tape and bureaucracy and indecision, and it needs a strong leader to bring the country together.
Well, that's the thing that is on the minds of people, is that Germany is a country no longer walking with shame of what had happened 75, 80 years ago. It is a totally different mentality and mindset of those people. They have a destiny which is sparked and ignited by the fact that they have to, first of all, survive, and they have to thrive, and they have to live with what's out east. Plus, they have historic recollections of what's happened over and over and over again. And so all these factors come in with Putin, who wants to bring the USSR back, and by taking these countries that are so unwilling to be part of that kind of coalition. And that's what's fueling, and that's what's making this to be a very, very complicated situation. I'm Ukrainian, and my parents are from that area, and I have cousins over there. I speak with Ukraine once or twice a week on WhatsApp to my friends, to the people who are in the middle of things. One of my cousins lives in Kharkiv. I work with a rehabilitation center, which is only 40 miles from the Russian border in Chernihiv. I have a very good fix on this. And one thing that's unitedly a mindset is they don't want to be part of Russia. again. They do not want to be part of that. They are different people. They have different mindsets. And they will do everything they can. And that's what's prolonging this conflict, this very bloody conflict that's cost hundreds of thousands of lives of Russians and Ukrainians, and the end is still not in sight. So we'll just have to see as we enter into the winter and a change of administration where exactly this will lead. Will we have some type of directive, some type of meeting of minds? Will Putin relax a little bit and say that we've lost enough and our economy is suffering and we're going to just rest for 5 to 8 years and then do it all over again? We're not certain what will happen. What do you think?
Well, what is interesting is that what's happening now is very, very similar to what happened in World War One. And Russia actually invaded East Germany, that led to the Germans going to war against Russia. And that war went on for 3 years, and millions of lives were lost.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until after the 3 years the Russian economy collapsed. And with the collapse of the economy, the government collapsed, and that led to the communists coming to power and signing a treaty with Germany to end the war. Now, the similar parallels could happen again. Putin's becoming increasingly unpopular in Russia, and the opposition to the war is growing. But more significantly, the Russian economy is almost on the verge of collapse, and they cannot sustain this war very much longer. But if Ukraine doesn't get the support from the West, then Russia could win. That cannot be allowed to happen. Now, at present in Europe, Germany is the largest giver of aid and supporter of military to Ukraine, but it's adopted a similar policy to America of containment. They're scared of confronting Russia and getting involved in the land war, which is playing into Putin's hands. So if there's a change of government that takes a more aggressive approach to Russia, then Russia would collapse. It cannot withstand the economic might of Europe and particularly of Germany. So it's very interesting how this is going to play out. But looking at history, the same what happened in 1917 and the collapse of the Russian Empire could happen again with the Russian Empire. And who will replace Putin? That will be another interesting scenario.
Putin was able to take Crimea with Obama when he was the president of the United States because he knew that he wouldn't do anything. He also knew and fought and attacked Ukraine when he knew that the Americans wouldn't do anything, and they thought this would be a very quick war when they had a column of over 100 miles long headed down to Kiev, where some of the generals even made reservations in restaurants for a victory dinner, thinking that this would be a short war, and turned out to be something different. But one thing about Trump, he does speak in a way that is taken seriously by people, unlike some of the other American leaders of Biden and Obama, who are more diplomatic, but they don't respect him. They really don't. They don't. Putin is cunning. He's clever. He's hateful. He's a complex man whose family went through World War II in Leningrad, and the family suffered. His brothers died in the war, so that's still very, very vivid with them. And he wants to leave a legacy at his age he's 72 or so, of being one who restored Russia to greatness. I never thought that the USSR would fall apart. I have traveled to the USSR several times when it was that, and I've traveled there many times after it fell apart. And I never thought that that would happen. Even people that we had, members of our church who were in East Berlin, never thought that East and West would come together. But it did. It did. And we thought this was something that was a new order, something that would last, but it didn't last very long. So we'll just have to wait and see where this goes. But I honestly, maybe it's hope against hope, don't think that Ukraine is just going to collapse. I do feel like there are other interests that will keep it afloat, as difficult and as expensive as it is.
It was interesting today that Putin congratulated President Trump, and said that he was open for negotiations, and he was holding up an olive leaf to end the war.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, he's been saying that for some time,
Yeah.
but it will be only on his terms. So we have to wait to see. But Putin's been, as you know, trained as a Russian spy, and he's very manipulative and he's very intelligent and determined to reach his goals. However, if Europe does form a collective defence policy against Russia, I think he would fold quite quickly, because the economy cannot sustain this war for too much longer, and is rapidly reaching the end of the line. The implications of this are global, because now North Korea has thrown in its lot with Russia, and South Korea is now said it will support Ukraine, and it's evolving into a global war, and one that at this time many nations are not in an economic position to sustain a long war. Many of the European economies are almost insolvent. The debt level is so high.
Mm-hmm.
The United States debt level is at such a dangerous level. It could collapse just like the Soviet Union with the weight of its debt if there was a lack of confidence in the US dollar and the US economy. And this brings us to the conflict in the Middle East, which could very rapidly spiral out of control any day.
Right.
With Iran now saying that it's going to launch further attacks against Israel. So this is it's all connected globally, and the implications of a war with Iran, and the United States will be heavily involved in that. It could affect the global economy, particularly if the price of oil goes up
Mm-hmm.
to unsustainable levels. So it's a very interesting time we're living in.
You might want to comment about the Federal Reserve that you heard today.
Well, the policies of the Trump administration are quite inflationary, in that they want to reduce taxes and increase the debt level to stimulate the economy. And that stimulated the American economy under the first Trump administration. But the Federal Reserve was standing firm and saying, look, America is in a very precarious position, and we're going to not allow the fiscal situation or try and avoid the fiscal situation deteriorating further. America's budget deficit is so large now that it cannot continue much longer before America will not be able to borrow the money to finance its deficits. If it goes back to printing the money, like they did during the COVID crisis, that will cause even more inflation and a lack of confidence in the dollar. So it's, I think a lot of the promises Trump's made on what he's going to do to the economy are not realistic.
Mm-hmm. Politicians say things that sound good at rallies, and people clap and cheer and hoot and howl. But they really cannot be implemented or implemented quickly. And people somewhat know that. People are waiting for Trump to deport the millions of people that have come to this country. They'll be watching to see what he really does, and many things will settle down to a level that only God knows, literally, will lead to what God wants to have come out.
Yes, well, one of the election campaigns or issues that was campaigned during the election was the cost of living. And Americans feel that they're poor than what they did 4 years ago in the Trump administration. And it was during the COVID crisis, which started during Trump's administration, that the Federal Reserve started printing money, and and the money flowed through the banking system that inflated the economy. And the Biden administration continued the same policy, which has caused the inflation. But it also increased the national debt considerably. And now America's having to pay over $4 billion a day, every day of the week, to service their debt just on the interest. So that money's got to come from somewhere, and it's coming from people's pockets. People are poor because the debt burden has grown that much higher, and it cannot continue down that path indefinitely. But it was not discussed by either party during the election. It did not want to talk about the debt or the serious issues. They wanted to talk about immigration and migrants. But that's the most serious problem facing America now, is how they're going to get the budget into balance, let alone reduce the national debt, which is now almost $35 trillion.
It's ridiculous.
That's
Yeah.
such an enormous amount of money.
Well, there's a new kind of economics too that says basically let's forget the debt and gotta move on. It's a denial that certainly at some point something is going to give, and it may give if there's a shift from the U.S. dollar as being the currency of the world to the yuan or to something else, and we'll just have to see what happens there.
The European Central Bank is preparing, they've recently launched a new digital currency, which will be sufficient to replace the dollar if the dollar did get they've lost the confidence in the dollar. That is the only feasible reserve currency I think we can have today. The Chinese and the Russians have been talking about the Brexit thing, but that's not a reality. I mean, most of the Brexit countries are bankrupt.
Mm-hmm.
China has almost, well, has larger debts than America per GNP, and it's really struggling to try and prevent its own economy from collapse.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a lot of factors around the world that could lead to a sudden global collapse, and it would happen very, very quickly. And Europe, Germany in particular, is the one country that has the reserves and the financial muscle to create a global currency. And I think these bitcoins and the digital currencies that they have, it's evolved, but they're not practical for buying and selling on a global scale for international trade.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing at this stage to replace the US dollar for global trade, but the US dollar is largely supported by the petrodollar because the dollar is used as the major currency for the oil trade. There's some movement away from the dollar, but still the majority of trade is in the US dollar. All these things are just coming to a head very quickly. I think over the next 2 or 3 months, we could see quite a different world to what we have now.
Well, people are saying too that President Biden isn't finished yet. There's still almost 3 months before he comes to office, and there's tensions are already certain.
Well, America sent the B-52 bombers to Israel, and they seem to be gearing up, expecting an attack from Iran any day. And if Iran does go to war and it closed off the Straits of Hormuz, closed off the Persian Gulf for the oil trade, then there could be a flow-on effect because the whole world, particularly China, is dependent on Middle East oil, and that also would affect the dollar. So how that will play out remains to be seen. But it's the Middle East situation is coming to a head, and every day it's becoming a more of a serious situation. Israel is very dependent on America.
It's very dependent on America, and also America has taken the side, or Trump will be looked upon as, and he is, favoring Israel. He's good buds with Netanyahu. It's been very shown already so very closely. And that is not going to set well with the Arab world. Right now, the amount of bombing and destruction that's taken place in Gaza and in Lebanon, but mostly the Gaza area, has been more than what has happened in Ukraine by the Russians. People don't realize just how much has happened there with all people that have been killed there as well. No matter how justified it is or whatever, in war, nothing is really clean. That's remembered and is escalating.
And no end in sight. It's so hard to eradicate a people who are opposed to you totally. It's they've been into Gaza and Lebanon in the past. Israel has, but they've haven't achieved achieved the goals in the short term, but in the long term, the situation has just gone back to even worse than what it was. So the other big concern I think Americans should have is that if Trump puts on the tariffs on
Right.
all imports in the United States, what implications that's going to have around the world? It's back in the 1930s, America put tariffs on imports, which triggered off the global depression of the 30s. And the same thing could happen again because other nations will retaliate. Europe actually has a trade deficit with the United States. America exports an awful lot to Europe, one of its biggest trading partners. China exports a lot to the United States, as do many other countries. So global trade is essential to maintain a healthy global economy and also maintain America's position as the leader of the free world. Now, if it cuts off, well, if America puts these tariffs on trade, it's going to have a major flow-on effect. And Mexico's major trading partner with the United States, and it would bankrupt many of the industries that are dependent on those exports to America. I think, because we don't know whether Trump will go ahead with that or not, and time will tell. But he said promises made, promises kept, and let's see if they are.
Yeah.
But it will make America very isolated, and America will not be able to have the income from its exports to support its debt, overseas debt, which is now nearly $8 trillion that the government itself owns to overseas creditors. And how can it finance their debt if it doesn't have income from trade? So, and there will be withdrawal capital from America if those tariffs are put on, and that would could very well bring the American economy down to its knees. A, a very reckless policy. America first sounds good, but America is the global leader of the free world, and the world looks to America as a role model, as a nation that offers so much to the world. If America turns its back on the world will turn its back on America.
If the United States falls, nobody's going to come to our rescue. America has come to the rescue of so many peoples and nations, even nations that hate us. It's come there with humanitarian aid, with other types of support. It's just truly amazing. But when the U.S. totters and collapses, the world will cheer that on, and nobody's going to come to our aid. That'll be the sad thing that is a reality that our people have not faced yet. And you were talking about trade wars. I remember with the Plain Truth magazine, when I first received it in the 1960s, there was talk about trade wars, trade wars, trade wars over and over again. And then it kind of stopped and went on. But here we are, and Trump did impose tariffs in his first first term as president. And all that does is just cause nations to retaliate with tariffs, and it doesn't produce any really good result.
Yes, I remember that. First Plain Truth I got 1960.
Yeah.
On trade wars.
Yeah, that was big. That was big. We didn't even understand what all the hubbub was about, but it was deemed as being very, very dangerous.
Well, just in summary, I think we need to watch very definitely what's happening in Europe with the German elections coming up.
Mm-hmm.
We think there will be a shift to the right and a more assertive government to what we have there at present. The American economy is in for a major shock before long. Many economists and bankers have been warning that we cannot continue like we are. And many other countries are no better off. France is technically bankrupt. Italy, New Zealand, we're all in a situation where we've been living on borrowed money and borrowed time and not being able to repay back those debts. And the day of reckoning is rapidly approaching.
But what about Australia and New Zealand?
Well, I think if these tariffs are put on all imports into America, you'll see new trading blocks develop out of necessity. So Asia is likely to work closely together, particularly China and India, because they need trade to survive. And Latin America the same, because particularly Mexico is very dependent on trade with North America, and if that is stopped, they are going to look at alliances. It's a trading bloc with Europe, with Asia, and elsewhere. So we'll see a major shift in power because of the trading factor. On the justice system, Donald Trump has said he's going to curtail some of the responsibilities of the Department of Justice, no longer allow cases against them to continue. And the danger is that you move into more authoritarian type of government,
Mm-hmm.
which the freedoms that we have taken for granted may be denied from us.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to wait and see how that plays out. I've got to say, this has to be one of the most interesting times in the world if you've been following international relations, current events in my lifetime. And the speed of change is breathtaking at the moment.
Well,
what could happen?
You've traveled in different places. I've traveled in many places, and my head is spinning from what we've seen, from what we grew up with, thinking that communism, China, Russia would be where they are forever. But things are shifting very, very quickly. Europe is shifting. I'd like to hear your comments a little bit about the United Kingdom.
Well, the problem with the United Kingdom is it's technically bankrupt too, and the recent budget that passed by the Labor administration to increase taxes it may see withdrawal of overseas investment from the UK, and it's in a bit of a bind because its debts are now over 100% of GNP, and it's since leaving the European Union, it's lost a lot of its market, and it's got to find new markets. It's hoping that he'll have a free trade agreement with the Trump administration, but that's questionable. And so UK is very much now a minor global power,
Hmm.
and not being a part of Europe has speeded up its decline as a world power. We'll see what happens there, but it's not looking great for the UK at the moment.
No, with the Labour government now in power, I'm not sure where they will take the country. And I'm not sure who Germany will look to as its allies because Germany cannot stand totally alone. It will need to have an alliance, an axis of support to be able to stand up against what they see in Russia and other places.
Is talking to a lot of Americans. They Americans tend to be more insular in their view of the world, and they do not see things from a global perspective. They see things from America's perspective, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, that's a it's a shame because they think simple solutions that Trump has presented to the American people are the answer. They're not the answer. This world's much more complex than saying you can make a peace treaty with Russia and solve the war in Ukraine in one day, or he can solve the Middle East problems
Uh-huh.
overnight. You cannot do that. And the economic problems, it's living in a fairyland to think that it's going to revive the economy by reducing taxes and spending more money. That's it's not sustainable. You've got to earn the money, then you can reduce your taxes. But that's not the thought of the politicians.
Okay, last question. What is the feeling about immigration to the U.S., which has been very troubling to hear about the millions of people that have come? Some people actually favor that. They feel like we need the labor, but that's just not the way to do it because I've been an immigrant myself. My parents were refugees. They waited in a refugee camp for 4 years before they found a sponsor to help them come to the United States. And now we feel like we don't follow those laws and let people in. What is the feeling of people where you live, New Zealand, Australia, when they see this as a problem, or do they just say that's their problem and I don't relate to it?
In the United States, the whole immigration policies need to be reformed and simplified so that it's easier for people to legally migrate there, and the penalties increase for those who illegally migrate. New Zealand is being an island. It's easy to enforce our borders, but our economy has been in a recession most of this year, and the government here has made it so it's almost impossible for a migrant to come here now. But after COVID, the government relaxed the policies, and many people came, but they couldn't get jobs and had to return back to their home countries.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we've got a more sustainable economic policies, but it's based on the needs of the economy rather than the United States, which is seen as a mecca for many people from all over the world to go to illegally.
Mm-hmm. Well, it certainly is a mecca. Well, listen, Bruce, it's been wonderful talking to you. I've just really appreciated just being able to kind of come into your mind a little bit and hear an international view of some of the things that we feel and live through and talk about over here. So thank you very much for your presentation.
And thank you for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure to participate.
Okay, thank you, and we'll meet
Thank
again.
you.
We thank you, our listeners, for joining us here today for the Kubik Report. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please share it and tell your friends about it. We can be found on a variety of platforms, including Podbean, which includes information about this podcast, Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Audible, Pocket Caster, and other podcasting platforms. You can easily find us on any browser address bar by simply typing in the words The Kubik Report, and there we are. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your impressions and suggestions. So write to us at vkubik@gmail.com, vkubik@gmail.com. Again, thank you for listening. Come back soon for more.